Have you ever wondered what happens when a powerful nation underestimates a rising giant? What happens when repeated pressure, unfair tactics, and hidden strategies push a nation too far? Yet instead of breaking, that nation becomes stronger. Because that's exactly what happened when America tried to hurt India. They thought India would fold. They thought India would kneel. But what they didn't realize is that pressure doesn't destroy the strong. It forges them. And today you're about to hear how that underestimation became America's ultimate mistake. Underestimation is often the spark that ignites the greatest transformations, and that is exactly what happened when America looked at India through the lens of an outdated past. Instead of seeing a rising power, a nation of innovators, and a population driven by ambition, they saw a quieter version of India that no longer existed. This misjudgment became the first domino that set everything else into motion. When a country believes you depend on its approval, it subconsciously expects compliance. But when that assumption is wrong, the cost becomes huge. America believed India would hesitate, compromise, or step back whenever pressure was applied. What they didn't understand was that India had been preparing for years, building its strength internally, investing in education, technology, defense, and global partnerships that didn't make headlines but changed the foundation of the nation. Every move America made based on that underestimation actually strengthened India's awareness of its own potential. Instead of reacting with fear, India reacted with clarity. Instead of backing down, it analyzed the situation and turned every challenge into an opportunity to level up. And beneath the surface, a silent shift took place. India realized that its rise didn't require permission from anyone. The more it was pushed, the more it understood the importance of standing tall without relying on external support. That understanding changed India's mindset from emerging nation to self-driven global force. The underestimation didn't weaken India. It revealed how much power it truly had when it stopped seeking validation and started trusting its own trajectory. And while America expected resistance to crumble, what actually happened was the opposite. A stronger, more confident, and more self-assured India emerged, ready to prove that no nation, no matter how powerful, can predict the limits of a country built on resilience and determination. Pressure can break the unprepared, but for those who are already sharpening their tools, pressure becomes the fire that tempers steel. That is exactly how India responded when America applied economic and political pressure. Instead of panicking or bending to demands, India treated every challenge as a signal that it was time to accelerate its growth. Each restriction, each barrier, and each diplomatic pushback became fuel for transformation. When certain technologies were withheld, India didn't sit in frustration. It built its own. When trade terms became tighter, India diversified and opened new doors. What was meant to restrict India ended up expanding its vision. Pressure exposed weaknesses, but instead of hiding them, India confronted them directly. It strengthened its digital infrastructure, invested in renewable energy, modernized its manufacturing, and encouraged innovation across sectors that had long been overlooked. Startups surged, research gained momentum, and local industries found new confidence. Rather than depending on foreign solutions, India began crafting its own path, one that aligned with its long-term ambitions instead of short-term compromises. Political pressure worked the same way. Attempts to influence India's decisions only reminded the nation of the importance of independence. Instead of becoming defensive, India became strategic. It formed stronger ties with friendly nations, built regional influence, and positioned itself as a stable, reliable player in a world full of uncertainty. The more pressure it faced, the more it prepared for a future where no single nation could dictate the course of its progress. In the end, pressure didn't push India down, it pushed India forward. It awakened a level of resilience, creativity, and unity that might have taken decades to develop under normal circumstances. The very forces meant to weaken India became the stepping stones that lifted it into a new era of strength. Self-reliance did not happen in India by accident. It was born from necessity, opportunity, and a growing realization that depending on foreign powers, especially those willing to apply pressure, was no longer sustainable. When America restricted access to certain technologies and limited India's participation in specific strategic sectors, the expectation was simple. India would struggle, fall behind, and eventually come seeking support. But instead of weakening, India shifted inward and discovered something far more valuable than external assistance, a belief in its own capabilities. The moment India understood that innovation could happen within its own borders, everything began to change. Engineers, scientists, entrepreneurs, and young visionaries stepped forward with ideas that were not just alternatives, but breakthroughs. India's digital revolution accelerated, its manufacturing sector gained confidence, and its research institutions pushed boundaries they once hesitated to cross. What was once imported began to be built at home. What was once borrowed knowledge turned into original solutions designed for India's unique needs. Self-reliance became more than an economic strategy. It became a mindset. It spread across industries, from defense to healthcare, from agriculture to space exploration. The country recognized that true strength lies in the ability to stand on one's own feet, not in being propped up by external powers. And as India became more self-sufficient, it also became more respected on the global stage. Nations saw a country that wasn't waiting for approval or permission. It was creating its own lane. This shift allowed India to move from being influenced to being influential. It no longer needed to negotiate from a place of dependence. Instead, it began making decisions rooted in national interest, long-term vision, and strategic clarity. Self-reliance didn't limit India's possibilities. It expanded them. And the world, including America, realized that a self-reliant India could not be controlled, cornered, or underestimated ever again. When pressure mounted and America attempted to isolate India diplomatically, the expectation was that India would lose global traction and become vulnerable. But what unfolded was the complete opposite. Instead of drifting away from the world stage, India moved closer to it. The more one nation tried to limit India's influence, the more other nations recognized India's strategic value, stability, and potential for long-term partnership. Isolation attempts created visibility, pressure created curiosity, and soon, countries that once observed India from a distance began actively seeking stronger ties. Nations saw a country that stayed calm under pressure, made rational decisions in tense moments, and maintained a balanced approach in global conflicts. That sense of stability became India's strongest diplomatic currency. While some powers were busy asserting dominance, India offered collaboration. While others issued warnings, India offered opportunities, and the world noticed. Countries in Asia, the Middle East, Europe, and Africa strengthened their economic, technological, and defense cooperation with India, not because of fear or obligation, but because they saw a nation rising with purpose and confidence. India also gained influence by proving it could say no. The ability to refuse unfair demands without collapsing earned global respect. It showed that India was not just another player, it was a nation capable of shaping the direction of global conversation. This firmness made India a preferred partner for countries looking for stability, neutrality, and long-term commitment. Even multilateral platforms began shifting. India's voice carried more weight in international discussions on trade, climate, digital governance, and security. What was meant to reduce India's reach ended up broadening it. The global community understood that India was no longer just participating in the world order, it was helping redefine it. And in that process, every attempt to isolate India only highlighted how essential it had become to global progress. When India demonstrated that it could function, innovate, and grow without relying on America, a major shift took place in the balance of power. For decades, America enjoyed a position of influence over many developing nations, using trade relations, strategic partnerships, and technological access as leverage. The assumption was that if a country depended on the U.S. for support, guidance, or resources, it would naturally align with American interests. But when India's actions showed that it no longer feared losing American assistance, the leverage that once seemed unshakable began to fade. India's rising confidence meant decisions were now driven purely by national interest, not by fear of disapproval. Whether it was buying energy from new partners, building defense systems locally, or forming independent alliances, India acted with a clarity that surprised many in Washington. This independence was not aggressive, it was assertive. It signaled that India respected America as a partner but no longer accepted America as a controller. And once that shift became visible, the power dynamic changed forever. The real price America paid was losing the ability to influence India's choices. Over time, other nations noticed the change. They saw an India that was no longer negotiating from weakness, but from strength. This made India's partnerships more valuable and America's influence less automatic. A country that can walk away from pressure becomes far harder to manipulate. A nation that can say no without fear becomes a nation the world listens to with seriousness. America didn't lose India as a friend, but it lost India as a dependent, and that loss is far more significant. It meant America could no longer assume compliance. It could no longer expect India to change direction with a single warning or restriction. The balance shifted, and India emerged in a position where global powers had to engage respectfully, not demand obedience. India's rise marked the beginning of a new era defined by confidence, clarity, and a deep understanding of its own capability. This shift wasn't sudden, it was the result of decades of transformation finally coming together. Every attempt to weaken India only reminded the nation of its resilience. The challenges it faced didn't discourage it, they awakened a self-belief that had long been building beneath the surface. India started recognizing that power isn't just about military strength or economic numbers. It is about mindset, unity, and the courage to carve your own path. This new era showed the world a version of India that no longer guessed itself. It spoke with authority, acted with purpose, and stood firm even when pressured. It wasn't aggressive, but it was unwavering. The confidence came from knowing that progress was happening at home in technology, manufacturing, space, education, and global diplomacy. A nation that sees its own growth happening in real time becomes unstoppable. This confidence spread to its youth, its industries, and its leadership, creating a collective energy that made India's rise feel inevitable. The more India believed in itself, the more the world began believing in India. Investors, allies, innovators, and global institutions saw a country that had matured into a stable force, and with that recognition came opportunities, ones that further strengthened India's global standing. America, like the rest of the world, realized that India was no longer a nation you could pressure into compliance. It had become a nation whose decisions influenced the global landscape. This era of confidence was not about rivalry or revenge. It was about standing tall, knowing your worth, and refusing to be underestimated ever again. India showed that true power comes from within, and once awakened, it cannot be silenced. When you look at India's journey, every challenge, every attempt to suppress it, every moment of underestimation, one truth becomes clear: strength is not something given to you, it is something you build. And India built it brick by brick, setback by setback, victory by victory. The world tried to limit India, but India expanded. The world tried to control it, but India broke free. And today, the world no longer looks at India as a nation waiting to rise. It looks at India as a nation already rising, unstoppable and unapologetic. So if there's anything you take away today, let it be this: never underestimate a nation that believes in its people. Never underestimate a country that refuses to bow down. And never underestimate the power of resilience, unity, and vision, because those are the forces that shape destiny. Now I want you to carry this message forward, share it, live it. Let it remind you that no matter who tries to dim your light, your strength will always shine through if you stand tall. Support India's journey, support progress, support a future where nations rise not by force, but by belief. Thank you for giving your time, your attention, and your energy. Thank you for being part of this moment. And until we meet again, stay strong, stay focused, and never stop believing in the power within you.